The aerospace industry is changing from older engineers and old ways of doing things to younger people, and it presents two different ways of two different entry points into the industry. Some of that is done the old-fashioned way, where you call on people, you ring them up. But we're finding more and more the younger people don't want to be bothered. If they want something, they'll look on the internet, they'll look, see who's using whatever. So while we still do the old, we go to the Paris Air Show, we have a booth, we put out flyers, we make sales calls, we try to make it easy to be seen and then easy to do business with. We also are finding that we need to find more ways to reach out to the people to get them to be aware of us. As the younger people come up, they're not ones that design the old aircraft, they're designing new stuff. So we're trying to find ways to get in front of them, to help them become aware of us, to help them reach out and see our products, and as I said, make it easy to do business with us.
Welcome to IndustrialSage, a free video podcast series all about digital marketing for industrial manufacturers. Hear interviews with your peers and find out how they're solving the same challenges that you might be facing in your own field. Coming to you from the Optimum Production Studio in Atlanta, Georgia, this is IndustrialSage.
Hey, so let's jump into today's episode. I have Mr. Paul Konrath here from Custom Control Sensors. He is the VP of Marketing and Sales. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today on IndustrialSage.
My pleasure.
All right, so you're coming in from LA. We were just talking about this before. Beautiful weather, it's perfect, and you're going to Lake Arrowhead this weekend. That sounds awesome. Sounds like good times. But for those who aren't familiar with Custom Control Sensors, tell me a little bit about your company, what you guys do, and maybe some of the products that you guys make.
All right, yeah. Well, Custom Control Sensors was actually founded back in the late 50s. It's a family-owned business. Some of their early products actually were used on the space programs, the Gemini, the Apollo, and the Mercury programs. And that got them started into aerospace, and eventually we moved from aerospace into industrial products as well, components for the most part. And the types of products that we make are typically called pressure sense switches and sensors. They react to fluid pushing against the part of the switch or the sensor and giving out some kind of an electrical output.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm sorry, go ahead.
They're fairly popular. I mean, if you look at the average airplane, there's probably 100 or so of these types of components on an aircraft. So you don't necessarily notice them. They're not a consumer item, but they're a heavily industrial and aerospace product.
So are you focused just exclusively on aerospace and aviation, or are there other industries?
No, we're one of the few companies that are more broadly based, where we have a very sizable aerospace component of our business, and we basically deal with all the majors and most aircraft that are flying. We have some military applications as well, both airborne and on the ground. Anywhere you might have fluids under pressure. And then on the industrial side, we kind of use industrial as a broad umbrella, but a lot of oil and gas type applications, a lot of processing, industrial processing. We have some other things in the energy, power. Your utility company probably uses some of our products as well.
Okay.
So, and then everything from Disneyland to Papa Gino's Pizza uses our products.
So I got a quick question. For those who aren't familiar then with, you mentioned the Gemini Project. All right, so in aerospace, for those who aren't familiar with that, what did you guys do with it? It's a really cool story. I'm an aviation and aerospace geek, so I think this is super cool.
So, that goes back in time in the beginning of the space race back in the late 50s and early 60s. One of the first manned rockets that NASA put together was started Mercury, I think, then the Gemini program, and eventually the Apollo. And what they did was obviously they put a gentleman on the top of a rocket, fired up into space, and the concern was when the spacecraft was coming back from outer space or somewhere on the orbit, they had to be concerned about deploying the parachutes. How could you deploy the parachutes perhaps this person was injured or who knows what happened. So they worked on coming up with a way to automatically deploy the parachutes for all of these spacecraft. And one of the ways they found was using a CCS switch that reacted to the atmospheric pressure. So as the spacecraft fell back through the atmospheric pressure built up. They monitored or they read that pressure, and at a certain altitude, the pressure in the atmosphere got enough to actually flip the switch or flip our switch, and that closed the circuit that then started a sequence that knocked the cover off the spacecraft and eventually deployed the parachutes out. And obviously, as you can know now in history, that the landings were always successful. But it was a CCS, actually there were a couple redundant switches just in case, but there were a couple of CCS switches that inaugurated the launch of the landing sequence. There was a switch in the main display on the main console that was you had to set it to automatic, so it was automatic, just in case, but you could also deploy the chutes manually by flipping the switch the other way.
Oh, that's cool.
Well,
I think that's a cool story.
It certainly got our start, and in fact, I was just talking to, because it's the 50th anniversary of the landings on the moon, Apollo now is starting to get a lot of recognition. And, you know, I did a little paper on that, and showed it around, and the president said, hey, we're also on the lunar lander, we were also in the rover, the spacecraft, the buggy that they rode around. So
that's awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
That's awesome. You have any other cool, really cool applications like that?
I'm like you. I love airplanes, and we see applications like the SR-71, the
Blackbird. Yeah.
And the B52 Bombers. It goes way back in time, and so we do still that. But most of our applications nowadays. Well, the other day we were talking about one on the Abrams tank, which you don't think about, but so we get a lot of those unusual applications from that standpoint. On the other hand, though, anywhere there's water, we come up on things, and so we do, or anywhere there's fluid, we do get involved, and that takes me all around the world.
That's awesome. Definitely some very cool applications. So, let's kind of talk about some of the sales and marketing a little bit with that. I would imagine, obviously, aerospace, defense, all these different areas definitely have some unique challenges in terms of the procurement process and, selling in. So, what would, I guess, what would you say, how are you guys, I guess, what techniques are you using essentially to get that message across and develop new business?
Let's talk about the aerospace a little bit. Not that it's totally unique, but it offers an interesting. The aerospace industry is changing from older engineers and old ways of doing things to younger people, and it presents two different ways of two different entry points into the industry. We generally are a technical product. We have to deal with engineers. We design parts for usually to some kind of specification. So an engineer is almost always involved. And we are a relatively small company. We're not quite as big as Boeing, and so it takes a while to get into people and finding the right people. Some of that is done the old-fashioned way, where you call on people, you ring them up. But we're finding more and more the younger people don't want to be bothered. And I say younger, I don't know. But they don't want to be bothered. If they want something, they'll look on the internet, they'll look and see who's using whatever. So while we still do we go to the Paris Air Show, we have a booth, we put out flyers, we make sales calls, we follow up on, try to make it easy to be seen and then easy to do business with. We also are finding that we need to find more ways to reach out to the people and get them to be aware of us. And once they become aware of us, then we can work on through the customer journey, as they call it. So that's where we're finding more with digital marketing. how to get people who don't go to the air shows, who don't necessarily know us from. We have a long history, and a lot of people in the aerospace, once they know you and they're comfortable with you, they'll continue to use you. But as the younger people come up, they're not ones that design the old aircraft. They're designing new stuff. So we're trying to find ways to get in front of them, to help them become aware of us, to help them reach out and see our products, and as I said, make it easy to do business with us. And that's where the digital marketing the effort that we're putting forward is starting to show results.
That's great. So, when we talk about digital marketing, a lot of times it can be a big nebulous term. What have you guys? Well, what are you guys doing? And I'm a follow-up question to that would be, when did you start?
Not soon enough.
Okay, all right.
It probably goes back in 2005, 6, 7, 8, I don't know. But it was one of the old it was a website, and then we thought that was all you needed to do. And a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, not long after I started with CCS, we said, it's not really doing us any favors, the website we had. So the first thing we thought was we need to have a platform that you can bring us into the modern capabilities, everything from building awareness all the way through to e-commerce, to have an interaction so that, Amazon's a great example.
Yeah.
Everyone gets that concept. So he said, okay, the one thing Amazon doesn't necessarily do is create an awareness. Everybody already knows it, but it doesn't build an awareness for your product.
Right.
But the concept was the same. So we revamped, actually started a brand new website that allowed us more flexibility, portals, communications, where you can look something up, you can come into our website and see what you ordered or want to buy, you can search for things. And at the same time, it did a much better job of allowing us to put content on it. And that was partly for search engine optimization, which is part of digital. I understand search engine optimization is part of digital marketing, but it's not the only thing out there.
Right.
Once we got this, we spent a year and a half it is a whiz bang, and I encourage you to just give it a shot. We sat back and said, okay, now we're going to see customers coming in. And while there was an increase, it wasn't to the level that we thought was necessary or that we wanted. So then we did a little more research and realized that the website is only one aspect of digital marketing. Mm-hmm. It's a big one, and it can be in the industrial market, probably the biggest. But you also need, you mentioned earlier, personas. You need people looking for you. You need to find those people or find a way to encourage them to come to your website. So we went out and we did the research, and we put together what I would say from an industrial component kind of product like ours, a roadmap. And so we realized that we have to find our audience, build our personas, look at who we do business with or who we want to do business with,
right, and
create that audience or that profile of that person. And we're in that stage on that area to build our profile and then look at our contacts, whether they're our engineering people's contacts, our purchasing people, our sales people, marketing people, and build up a customer relationship database and put them in the different personas. We don't want to be, we do business with tire presses where we sell a switch that goes on a tire press that makes tires that prevents the worker from being exposed to hot steam at high pressure. We also put things on the Orion spacecraft that they're working at. We don't want email blasts that are geared to the space to show up in the tire manufacturer engineer's mailbox. So, there's some of that where you're sorting out your customers. And after that, then there's the email blasts where you do the white papers, blogs, anything you can, segment it to those specific personas and send them out to those people with links to your website or somehow to find your website. And once they're there, we hope that there's enough there to keep them interested or at least to make them aware of CCS. So at a future time, when they get into the product consideration point, they go, CCS had a pretty easy website to work. Let me go see what they have. And ideally, you have a call to action that whether it's request a quote, maybe ideally at some point they'll be able to buy the part or specify a part. Then one of our salespeople would call them and get in touch with them and say, I see you're looking at this such and such product. Can I help you out with that final decision to buy it?
Yeah.
So does that give you enough understanding, or you need more?
No, absolutely. That's great. I mean, that's the big thing. So, you said about 4 years ago you started going into that after the whole website change. Is it how long do you think it took from hey, we're doing the website implementation to like getting to where you're talking about now with having segmentation in your emails and content specific to those different personas? What would you say? How long did it take to kind of develop that and iterate it?
Oh, it's a never-ending process in some way. But I would say that we see it as a 3 to 4 year program. Mm-hmm. The website took a lot longer than we had expected, but I would say we were naive in both what was expected or what it took to really put out a good website.
Yeah.
And that part of it is just looking at all our competitors, looking at some of the better ones out there and saying, what can we do? What does the budget allow for? What do we want? What do we want the end product to be? And then we went out and found somebody to help us with that. And while they were a good company, we weren't the only program on the block there. And fortunately, the gentleman in charge on our end had put together a very clear profile of what we were trying to do. And that kept us from wandering off, because there are a lot of distractions that you can come upon when you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few. Shiny squirrel. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, totally get that. So I'm curious, from an organizational standpoint, when you guys started going down this road, was there a whole lot of buy-in that you had to get, or was it more generally accepted saying, we really need to start going down this road, or like, what did that look like?
Well, first of all, I have a very enlightened, people who run our business, they're very enlightened. My boss, the owner, as I say, he recognized that the website wasn't doing us any favors. Mm-hmm. And so when we brought the subject up that if you want to grow as much as you want to grow, we need a better platform to do that with. He was, as a good boss would say, show me the plan. And the stakeholders are relative. It's a small company, so it's relatively easy to pull together the key stakeholders. Mm-hmm. He bought it. We did the whole plan, the budget, what was expected, and what we did. We underestimated the time it would take and the internal resources that were necessary to build up the databases that were required. But once we got the program rolling, it moved along. There were some parts where it dragged, where we were asking, we had an agency help us. We held a pretty high standard, and we tried some new things, and they tried some new things with us. And I think we underestimated the complexity. But in the end, the final results, just by pushing through, the final results bore out what we expected and came out real well. So. And he was happy. I'm sure at points he looked at the checks that were being written, looking at the results, and how do you get a return on investment with a website? It takes time.
Right.
It's not a switch. But we had buy-in from his level and full support. And in fact, there are days, and he would make sure we regular updates and weekly meetings and what have you.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that can be a scary thing, obviously, writing the checks and then saying, hey, because the reality of it is that this stuff takes time. Like you said, it takes time to implement. Not only, okay, fine, it's implemented and we, flip the switch. It's not like, voila, overnight, everything's happening. Anecdotally, unless if you have the data, how long do you think it took to say, hey, we've got a positive ROI on this thing, or at least we're seeing, some strong KPIs that, okay, this is good and we're moving in the right direction?
I would say we're not quite there yet by his standard. We are, from a user standpoint, we are seeing good metrics on the users on the website. People are coming, spending more time. We have a global distribution base, and the very good participation from their side, which is it's a good measurement. You know, we go out to all around the world. Hey, you using the website? Yep, love it. It's great. We see a little bit of a reduction in workloads on some of our people here because people would call us up or come to us for questions or certain things. Now they go on the website and they find what they're looking for and they're happy with it. So that's part of the ROI that's kind of hard to measure.
Right.
It's not just how many people are on the website. It's, hey, we're getting business that we didn't have to do write the quote, do the research, because people would go on there, find the part they wanted. And we have like 10,000 parts. So some of that data and putting it out there took longer than we expected, but now that it's out there, updating is pretty easy.
Yeah, so you mentioned another thing a little bit earlier on. We were talking about e-commerce a little bit, and so you've kind of set up. Do you have a fully fledged like e-commerce, like from a payment system like standpoint, or is it from a more product catalog that's online kind of thing?
It's at this point, it's more of a product catalog. You come to us with your needs, and it will sort through your you want it in explosive or non-explosive? Do you want it this environment or that environment? Do you want it made out of this material, that material? And it will steer you from, like I said, 10,000 parts down to a couple. And in the end, at this point, it's not an e-commerce site, but now you can be very clear and you can say, this is what I want, how much will it cost, how soon can I get it? And so we see the e-commerce still a few years away.
Okay.
It's a goal. It's our what do you call it? That's our goal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you mentioned already before, and I probably should have asked this, and I didn't think to ask till just now, but you mentioned your distributors. So are you, like, what percentage of business do you do through distribution versus direct?
Okay, well, and we use distributors in the aftermarket for the aerospace. Aerospace is, in some ways, similar to industrial, but obviously, if we sell to the aircraft manufacturer, that's the OEM, and that's ultimately the guy who makes the airplane. Airbus, Boeing, Bombardier. And then once they sell it to an airline, now that part has to be maintained. And so, they would look for a CCS part wherever they can find it. And as you know, there's a lot of airlines out there, a lot of people looking for parts around the world, and they generally want the part immediately because the plane needs to fly. So we've taken on a distributor that is a global supplier, and they put our product on the shelf, and that way anybody looking for my parts in the aftermarket would call them. Granted, there's a premium because it's on the shelf, but that handles the aftermarket in the aerospace, repair, maintenance, and overall type requirements. That's one. On the industrial side, it's not unlike that. It's just more diverse. So we often try to sell to people like General Electric that use our parts, GE, turbines, what have you. Once that gets put out somewhere in the industry, now people have to maintain it. And that's where our distributors would come in. On the other hand, because the world's a big place and we're a relatively small company, a lot of our distributors also sell to OEMs. And most of our industrial business tends to go through our distributors. We have, majority of it goes to distributors, and we're good with that because they know the local business, local customs. They handle the shipping, and where appropriate, they keep it on the shelf. Where we're not appropriate, we might ship direct to the end customer, but we deal with it through the distributor, either as a sales rep or as a distributor.
So, bear in mind with all of that, how is with the website and all the other digital marketing activities you're doing, helping to support your distributors? What would benefit have they driven off of, let's say, having the product cataloged, I can't talk, on their website?
Well, the first one is customers they need a part, some of them know a part number, some just know what it has to do.
Right.
So they would, in the past, call up a distributor and say, I need a pressure switch, and I need it for this kind of pressure and this kind of a temperature environment and this kind of a setting. And the distributor would have to get out the old catalog, flip through the catalog. It could be this one. Oh, it could be that one too. And, well, let me get your price. And let me see what I have here. And okay, so the first phone call is to the distributor, giving the guy, I'm looking for a part. And the distributor says, okay, let me get back to you while I look through the catalog. And then he finds the part and maybe goes back and he talks to the person about, is this the right part? I got this here or that one there. Well, what's the price? Well, let me get back to you. I got to find the price.
Yeah.
And what's the lead? When are you going to deliver it? No, well, let me find that out. The website is set up so now either the distributor or his customer can go into it and knowing the product, the pressure, the characteristic he's looking for, the specifications, he can narrow it down to, it's all drop down menus and filter it down to, oh, that's the part I could use or that part. And you read a little bit of either one of those two. Then when he calls a distributor, he now has a part number. So I'm looking at this one or I'm looking at that one. The distributor can go, okay, well, let me go online, let me go to the portal, and he can come back and say, well, I have some on my shelf, or I don't have any of that, but CCS will have one tomorrow if you want it. And let me get you a price right now while I got you on the phone.
Yeah.
And he can, the whole interaction, one phone call all the time, and the customer can place the order if he wants to. Or if he doesn't want to deal with the distributor, he can come to us and put a request for our website. We get it, we respond to it. In our case, it actually does go back to the distributor because we want the distributor to feel part of the interaction and have that chance to pick up the phone and talk to the customer as well. So we want to make it easy for the customer to do business with us, but we certainly want to make sure that we keep the distributor in the loop as best we can and as automatically as we can.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I love that. I mean, it's really, we talk about this a lot, just ways being able to make it easy for your distributors. Obviously, your customer, the end customer, but when you're working with distribution, I mean, essentially you've got kind of two different audiences a little bit there. You want to make it really easy for the distributor, so like, oh, this is easy, this is great to work with these guys because they've got my back. Information, I don't have to go through all this rigmarole. And the same thing, for the end user, for that customer there, so that customer there. So that's that's fantastic. So sorry, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, yeah, you made a good point about making it easy for the distributor because the distributor probably has, for that matter, any salesman has a lot of products to sell.
Yep.
And you try to make yours as easy as possible. And at the same time, you get to share his mind, and that's what you try to do is keep them. Wow, it's easy to sell this product, or it's easy to do business with them. So I give them more of my mind share because he's got limited resources too.
Exactly. It reminds me of an episode we just released. Well, by the time your episode we're shooting right now is released, it'll be a couple weeks later. But actually, I had my father on for a Father's Day edition, and he's actually an independent sales rep for about 18 to 20 manufacturers in building high-end building materials. So it's fairly niche. If you will. But that was one of the things we talked about was actually the challenges of independent sales reps relative to manufacturers and just what manufacturers can do to make, essentially their life easier. It's sort of the same thing for distributors. And it's just, if you're repping that many different products or companies, sure, price and, rebates and all that good stuff, is certainly part of it. But making it easy so that it's like, man, that made my life a million times easier. This is great. Like, that's a huge win.
And so CCS has their foot in both sides. In the aerospace market, we have manufacturers reps, as you refer to manufacturers representatives, and that's usually done on a country basis. Again, it's so they can talk the same language, they can reach out and be there quicker. And generally we look at areas where there's aerospace, whether it be Europe, obviously, Germany, France, China, Japan. So we understand that something else that customers like to deal with is they like at some point to talk to somebody on a comfortable basis and get, maybe the sales rep is not the top technical guy, and we don't expect him to be. We look for him to be the relationship person, the person who knows the customer, who can talk to the customer, who can help along, keep that relationship moving, keep the discussion going. And again, tell us when we're off the beam to say, hey, if you want to do this, you gotta do this because this is how people in Europe do it, or people in China do it. So the U.S. is a little different because we have we have distributors here.
Yeah.
So some of them call themselves manufacturers reps, so they don't carry inventory. I'm okay with that. That's whether or not you carry inventory. As long as you get the customer and you get the sale, I'm okay.
It's all good. Make them happy. So as we look to wrap a little bit, for I guess my last question would be, for those manufacturers that are on the fence and they're trying to figure this out, trying to dial up, maybe they haven't seen that ROI or they're a little nervous about it. What's your message or your piece of advice to them?
Well, first of all, thanks to people like Google and Google Analytics, you can get a pretty accurate assessment of your return on investment from your digital marketing, or your website, I should say. Because people come to the website, how long they stay, what do they do, and ideally in your website, there's some call to action. I send you this, and when you link in, when you go to the website, you place a quote, you ask for more information, some kind of a link, excuse me, something though that makes them do something. So you can see that I sent out this email and that link was to this part of the website, and the traffic picked up, and we got a lot of quotes for that kind of a product. And there is a leap of faith, no question about it, but the numbers, we're starting to get enough data that says if you're not out doing this, you're missing a large opportunity. And you can keep going to trade shows, but how do you know your return on investment from a trade show? That's or a print ad. And I'm not saying print ads are bad or trade shows are bad. We do a little of that from time to time. But I like the idea of this website, Google Analytics, SEO optimization effort, because you do get numbers and you can see the increase in the traffic and the increase in the time people spend on your website. And the drop ideally in the bounce rate, and ideally if that's not increasing sales, then you got a different problem. You see, wow, I'm getting more potential customers. I'm getting more looks. I'm getting more people interested in these are people who are there not because they're just cruising the internet. They have an interest in your product. If you don't see a result in increase in sales, maybe you have something else missing in the equation. That give you a little bit of a...
What did they say? The famous saying that says information is power. I mean, that's really, in this day and age, in the informational age, it's just that. We have information and it's powerful, and you've got the data. So. No
question, yeah. So and as I tell my people, your perception is one thing, but data doesn't lie. Show me the data, bring the data, let me see what you got, and then you can start to. You can move it wherever you want, but you can interpret how you want. But it's data that you can use. So, and I do find that much more available in the electronic age, in the website, and the digital marketing.
Absolutely.
So that is one of its strengths as people get more comfortable with that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, hey, Paul. Thank you so much for joining me today on Industrial Sage. For those who would like to come check you out, your website is CCS Dualsnap.com. I get that right?
That's better.
All right, awesome. So let's check out the snazzy website. We'll look at the product catalog. Obviously, if there's manufacturers out there that could use your product, give them a call. But thank you again for your time and just sharing your insights and your story, because I think it's really helpful and it will resonate with a lot of other people in our audience.
Good. Well, hey, it was a pleasure. I certainly enjoyed it. I was a little nervous at first, but you do a very good job. So thank you.
No reason to be nervous. Thanks so much. All right. Okay, so there you have it. Listen, really, I really enjoyed this episode. There's a lot of key takeaways that I have. I'd say the things that are coming to mind first is I really loved hearing Paul's story about how they started doing the website. And if I have the metric right, I think it was like around 2005. It's 2019 right now. That was 4 years ago. I'm sorry, that was 14 years ago. If my math is right. And it's an iterative process. It wasn't something that was happening overnight. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. And you just got to keep dialing it in. And kudos to their owner there, who was saying, yes, we do need to do this, and kind of punching through a little bit of that fear, saying, I feel like this is the right thing, but sometimes you don't necessarily get that immediate ROI. It's going to take time, and it as you continue to grow and you continue to do that, you're going to start seeing some of those benefits. You're going to start seeing a lot of residual the opportunities and different things, like, for example, where customers might have questions about things, or where you might have to have phone support for that. But now, because of the information that's on the website, they're able to get access to that when they want it, which could be 3 a.m, or whenever. And is also helping their distributors. So, and I love the whole workflow of just kind of how they're generating leads and using sort of processing it through the website to be able to basically provide that information and that value to them. So hopefully you have a couple key takeaways yourself. Take 1 or 2, implement them today. If you're still trying to, hey, we need to do this, see what you can do from learn from Paul and what they're doing to implement it in your company. So. That's all I've got for you today. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them for you. You can reach out to us at industrialsage.com/questions. We'll answer them for you there. If you're on any of the podcasting stations, we'd love a review. Hey, if you're on social media, share the love. And last but not least, if you're not on our email list, subscribe. You really, really want to do it. And here's why. We have a lot of great content that you're not seeing or hearing on the website. If you're on the podcast, there's a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of offers. There's a lot of great tools and resources to help you be a better salesperson, be a better marketer in your company, in that manufacturing and industrial space, and to learn about all the great new things that are coming out. Because as you and I know, that marketing, all this stuff keeps changing. The core hasn't, but the wrapper does. So anyways, we've got some great stuff for you. I'll stop hammering that. I'm done. I'm done yapping. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next week with Industrial Sage.